The great artist who held court in room 412 of the Juilliard School on Claremont Avenue in New York had heard practically everyone there was to hear in the golden age of pianism. Born March 28, 1880 in Kiev, Rosina Levine heard Anton Rubinstein when she was a child, the Titanic pianism of Joseph Hoffmann in 1899, the hyper-romantic composer-pianist Alexander Scriabin, and the technical wizardry of Leopold Godowsky. In her own right, she graduated from the Moscow Conservatory in 1898 with the gold medal, just as Rachmaninoff had a few years before her, though his coveted award was for composition. But when she married the revered pianist Joseph Levine, Madame Rosina Levine essentially put her performing career aside, contenting herself to aid him in his career and, meanwhile, becoming perhaps the most influential piano teacher of her generation. Through the doors of room 412 would pass no less than John Browning, Garrick Olson, Misha Dichter, David Bar-Alan, Ilana Vered, Adele Marcus, Ralph Votopek, and inevitably, Van Cliburn. Not that Van automatically would turn up at the next great teacher's studio. First, there were hurdles, expected and unexpected, to finesse. By 1951, I had forgotten about Van, says Joseph Reich, the longtime Juilliard piano faculty member who had been mesmerized by Van's performance of Liszt's Liebestraum No. 3 during the Juilliard summer session in 1948. 2 years later, the next thing I know, he's up for entrance exam. I'm on the jury, and this kid comes up to play. I don't remember specifically what he played for his entrance exam, except for one piece. He ended with the 12th Hungarian Rhapsody of Liszt. And except for Joseph Hoffmann, who used to play it a lot and was just nonpareil, nobody I have ever heard in my life played that piece as marvelously as Van did that day. He had studied it with his mother, who studied it with Arthur Friedheim, who, of course, studied with Liszt himself. Whether it was his mother who taught him to play like that, or the kid was a natural, or both, it was so gorgeous. Mark Schubart, then the dean of Juilliard, who attended the entrance exam and found it obvious that Van was enormously talented, an extraordinary talent, although his music seemed a little wild at the time, but that's normal in someone that young. He was a tall, gangly, very jovial, outgoing person. Right from the beginning of the audition, there was no doubt that he was unusual, no doubt that he would be admitted. Naturally, Van planned to study with the revered Madame Levine. That she represented the Russian school of pianism, with its emphasis on technically brilliant repertoire and oft extravagant emotional expression, suited both Van's temperament and the Russian tint of his mother's teaching. So Van came into the school, recalls Reich, and in those days I helped Mrs. Levine with some of her students. She was so crowded that she used to ask me to take 2 or 3 students every year, to help her out. That did not mean I was her assistant, but I used to do it because if I had room on my schedule, I was always willing to take one of her students. She always got talented ones, so I didn't mind teaching them. Basically, I'd teach them for a year or 2, and as soon as they made an A, she would take them, and so forth. Well, Van was going to go to her, but she was crowded, and the school asked me to take him. Though Van admired Reich both as teacher and pianist, he had made up his mind that he was going to study with Madame Levine. In fact, he turned down a full scholarship to Columbia College for study with pianist Carl Friedberg, who had known Brahms and Schumann. I simply wanted to be at the Juilliard School, and I